Paul started off last week, we looked at the first 5 verses, and he says perilous times, dangerous times will come. Now, don't get me wrong, for those who have the spirit of the Antichrist, they're going to be a pig in slop. It's going to be the most hedonistic, immoral, blasphemous time, and they're going to just be loving it, pigs in the slop. But for us who are standing for the truth, the price to keep the truth is going to get bigger and bigger. Today, we are experiencing persecution. If you let it be known in your high school campus or your college campus that you are a Christian, especially if you're a Christian standing for Israel, talking about the miracle of God bringing the children of Israel from the four corners of the earth back in, you will suffer for it. If you let your professors know you're a born-again Christian, you probably won't get as good a grade. If you go into the workplace and you make it known that you are a Christian. I know in San Diego there was a couple of lawsuits where somebody had on their shirt, Jesus is King, and it was the name of a band or something, and the teacher or the principal said, you've got to turn the shirt inside out or leave campus. And anyway, it ended up being a lawsuit, and they ended up winning. And it was a wealthy family. I happen to know them. It wasn't about the money. It was to let it be that we have free speech. But and so we're experiencing that. And of course, with the neighbors, you know, if it's such a dividing point politically these days, right? I mean, if one had a Trump sign out and the other one had a Biden-Harris out or Harris-Biden, you know, it was, they might not talk. I'm amazed how many kids have cut their parents off because they voted for Trump. But vice versa, there's some liberal parents that their kids told them, and they said, I am no longer paying for your college, and I'm cutting you off completely. It's an interesting time, but this is the spirit of the last days. And in that perilous times, he gave us 18, depends on how you count it, 19 things to describe it. Wow. It was clear prophetically in Paul's mind how hedonistic, how immoral, how violent and vulgar of a generation that would be such an antichrist spirit. And then he makes it clear in verse 5, having a form of godliness, but denying its power, from such people turn away. Paul said to the Romans in Romans 6:17, I urge you, brethren, note those who cause division and offenses, contrary to the doctrine which you have learned, and avoid them. So those people, 2 John says, they come knocking at your door, don't open the door because you share in their sin. The neighbor across the street said, I guess our neighbors like the Jehovah's Witnesses. They're talking to them a long time over there. Oh, our neighbors, you know, they seem to be really friendly with the Mormons that came to the door. I guess I'll open my door and talk to them too, since our Christian neighbor that we respect so much is. John says, don't do that, because you're going to share in their sin by engaging with them in that way. Now, there are apologists who have that ministry, like Walter Martin used to have and others. Now, after last week's message, a few of the ladies said, oh, that's so scary. I'm so disturbed. I'm so scared. And I had a few of you say that. And I said, well, understand there's going to be a grace that we don't know about yet that's going to be given. It reminds me of that story where Corrie ten Boom, as a young junior high girl, told her dad, I'm afraid of dying. And her dad said, you know, we go to Germany once a quarter because they would change the clocks and all of Europe would be set. They would all come from various parts to get their clocks synced up, and then they'd go back to their different parts of Europe. And he said, when do I give you your ticket for the train ride? And she said, right before I step on the train. He said, in the same way, when it's time for you to step on that train, God's going to give you the grace that you don't know about, and he'll take that fear away. In the same way, we will have a bravery we don't know. We'll have a grace and a joy we don't know. I think of Stephen. I don't think he thought himself as some brave, courageous guy ready to die for Christ. But when it came to that moment when they were saying, defend yourself, why are you a believer in Jesus? And he started speaking and the Holy Spirit empowered him. But what happened when they started stoning him? The heavens opened up and he saw Jesus on the throne. And the rocks didn't kill him. It said just as if he fell asleep right there. And boy, if you read the Fox's Book of Martyrs, you got to realize for hundreds of years, Christians carried around with them their Bible, a hymnal, mostly the Wesley hymns, but others also, and the Fox's Book of Martyrs. They would never be found separate from those three books. And they would sit in the garden, they sat out in the parks, and they would read under the trees to give themselves courage to not give in to the tyranny of Europe against Christianity, as so often was the case. And so, again, we should be greatly comforted that we're not blindsided by this. It's not like, wow, I thought the Lord was coming back. It would be more people than ever believed in the Lord, and the Lord's going to rapture most of the people on the earth. And instead, it's getting worse and worse and worse. I didn't see that coming. I had no idea that would be the case. Is the Lord really Lord? Is he really in charge? You see? But the fact that he said it's going to be the days of Noah, which was a violent society where the thoughts and the intents of man were evil continually, that the days would be the days of Noah, which was an immoral society, a wealthy society. You got to read Ezekiel 18 to get the whole list of things. But they also, we discover, was a homosexual permeated society that wanted new flesh. They were not satisfied with this. They had a new body to play with sexually. And that is going to be the spirit of the days which is now happening. And we looked at it last week where Paul said, when God takes his hand away from holding the wall against evil of a society, like holding the wall of a dam, when he lets go, the first thing that happens is men will crave men and women will crave women. So it's the sign that the Lord has let man run free without the same resistance as before. And we learned in 1 Timothy 4 that in the Spirit expressly says, jumping up and down like a cheerleader, in the last days there will be new, different, strange doctrines of the demons that will deceive many, and some will depart from the faith. I'm not saying they're not going to heaven, but they're going to quit following sound doctrine, and they're going to start following lying doctrines, which we see today. As I mentioned last week, after the election, there was this lesbian pastor of, I don't know now, Episcopal, Presbyterian, United Methodist, take your pick. They're all receiving this. And she basically said that if you are a conservative Christian, you are the Antichrist. Because Jesus opens his arms to all transgendered and gender fluid and LGBT plus. Jesus is that, And that's why they do the rainbow, because God gave the rainbow and God's given this, and on and on and on and on. And very eloquent speaker, by the way, but somebody who is spewing doctrines of demons. And so we saw this, and we pick up now and looking at this culture a little bit more. In verse 6, starting today, for of this sort are those who creep into households, make captive of gullible women, loaded down with sins, led away by various lusts. You know, the English doesn't really translate this well. You've got to go to some Greek words to understand this particular verse. The word creep is actually the word to slip on clothes. So if you had an overhead sweater and you were slipping it on, that's the word. And the metaphor is, again, what you would think. A wolf slipping on a sheep's garment. This is the idea. They're transforming themselves. Even though they are from the pit of hell, they're slipping on, transforming themselves into an angel of light, or whatever they need to be. They're salesmen. They're sizing up the person. Now, in the culture of this day, women were not invited into the education that boys and men were. Women they could learn stuff, but it was sort of on their own. They really weren't educated, whether it was in the discussions of the day or whether it was religion. Women were second-class citizens in most religions, especially Judaism. They really didn't need to learn it. They didn't have to learn it. It wasn't the same. Today, Judaism, they have bat mitzvah as well as bar mitzvah. Didn't exist back in the day where girls would learn what the boys did. And so because of this lack of education, because of the lack of the knowledge of the scriptures that the boys had, women were unprotected. And when the morning came, men went out to work. And so the house was a vulnerable place. So when do the Jehovah's Witnesses show up? Usually it's during the day where they're going to find ladies. Of course, now nobody goes to work anymore. They just do it from the house. There are a big percentage of people. But for most of our culture, the woman was exposed. And what would happen is they would sell them. You know, again, you get sort of bored at home. You're doing a lot of stuff, and somebody wants to come and knock on your door and, show you the vacuum or the latest cutting knife. As much as you don't want to buy it and you have no intention of buying it, still it's like, yeah, I want to see what's in your box. I want to show it to me. Let me come in and vacuum part of your house, and I'll show you how good this vacuum works. It's like, okay, 15 minutes, go ahead. It's just sort of our nature as human beings. But these guys were good. They could size you up, and then they could start drilling in to where you feel guilty, where you are vulnerable, and then to sell to you the philosophy that would appeal to you, to seduce you into believing the lies. And so it's the same thing we see with Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, and others today, going house to house, trying to find vulnerable people. I found elderly women in our church in San Diego that would be saying, "Oh, I can't come this Saturday. I'm having a Bible study at my house." And it's like, "What? What? Tell me about it." It's like, "Oh, these wonderful people from the Watchtower Society come. They've been coming the last 4 weeks." It's like, "Oh, that's a cult. Oh, they're really nice. Don't say that about them." And I'll tell you what, I've seen people that were raised in traditional churches, and you try to explain to them the Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses are a cult, and they think you're horrible for saying that because they know Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses, worked with them, went to school with them, they're neighbors, whatever, they're wonderful people, and I am very offended that you would say something bad about them. I'm not saying something bad about them. I'm saying what they're teaching is from the pit of hell. It's satanic. The Mormons believe Jesus is one God of infinite amount of gods, and you can be a God yourself. Sound familiar? Isn't that what Satan said from the beginning? Jehovah's Witnesses say that Jesus is just an angel who was a really, really good angel, and so you can give him a God with a small g, but really Jehovah, which isn't Jesus, is God. And these kind of things, and of course, they're all work salvation, a different gospel, a different Jesus. And it says here that they take them captive. The actual Greek word here is to capture somebody by the point of a spear, that they do feel captured. In other words, I have to believe what they're teaching me now, or I'm damned. I'm going to go to hell. This is the way all cults are. To be right with God, you got to be right with the religion. If you're not right with the religion, you're not right with God. You can't be right with God and not be a Catholic to Catholicism. You've got to also be a Catholic. The day you stop being a Catholic is the day you're no longer right with God. You're not right with the Jehovah's Witness, the Watchtower Society, then you're not right with God. And this is it. If you come to Calvary Chapel, we think we're one of a multitude of Bible teaching churches. And if you want to go to a different Bible teaching church, I'm fine with that. I do not feel like you're losing anything or you're a second-class citizen. I mean, it's true, you won't have as good a sermon as you have here, but that's just my opinion. And so the gullible women, literally, it means little women. Little woman is actually the translation of this. And gullible doesn't mean they're stupid. It just means they've been kept in the dark. They haven't been educated. They don't know about religion. And what happens is they feel their conscience is heavy and they don't know how to relieve their conscience of their own sin. And I grew up in a church that didn't really teach the Bible, and I was always unclear whether I was saved or not saved, whether I was forgiven or not forgiven. And I remember them saying, "Now go tell people about Jesus." And I'm like, I like my friends. I don't want to tell them about this, to come and feel guilty all the time and feel like you should do more and never do enough. And now you sin, you're going to go to hell, and you got to wait till next Sunday to get saved again. I never, but once I understood the true doctrine, my burdens were gone. But in this Judaism and in other religions, these ladies are feeling what every human being feels, and that is the guilt of their sin, the shame of their sin. And these guys seeing that, use that to get in the door to say, that's why you need to become a Jehovah's Witness. You know, this is one of their ploys. Are you struggling with lust? How did he know that? He's reading my mind. Everybody does until they start following the Watchtower Society. That's everybody does till they start following the teachings of Joseph Smith. Do you lie sometimes? He knows me. That's why you need to be a Hindu or a Muslim or whatever. This is what they did. It was simplistic, sort of like Eve, right? I mean, Eve did not have a chance against that slick snake, Satan, did she? She was just a naive child. That's the understanding here. She was just a naive child, and Satan would easily deceived her when she started a conversation with him. The answer is she never should have started a conversation with him. And it says there, they're loaded down with sin. They just are feeling guilty. And then they're led by various lusts. These particular cult people, these particular liars, end up seducing them sexually. So on top of their own sins, it is amazing when you look like Joseph or David, the guy from Waco, Koresh, and a lot of these guys, they all had multiple women, didn't they? And like David Koresh, he said, nobody can have sex but me, and I'm now going to have sex with the older women my age, and little girls. And they all said, okay, you know, bizarre. And so here somehow, and I don't know, I don't see this kind of religion going door to door right now. But eventually, if you really want to have your soul purified, let me do it. Take all your clothes off. And, let me rub some healing oils on your body, on your naked body, and then somehow this is going to enlighten them and purify them spiritually through some kind of all different types of sexual activity. Verse 7. always learning, never able to come to the knowledge of truth. Those who are teaching them and those who are listening to them, they are learning and learning another book on top of another book on top of another book, another teaching, another seminar, another week's worth of pamphlets to buy, more tracts to have. They just keep heaping up all the materials, the latest weekly magazine from the cult. But they never really come to the truth about man, about sin, about reality. It's interesting that virtually all cults reject that man is born into this world with a sin nature. Almost all of them say, and it seems to be pleasing to people to say, no, we're all born good. It's your lack of education. It's your environment. It's your lack of money. It's if you got a better environment, had more money, better education, you would be a better person. Those who are criminals are people that are in poverty. They were born good people. And here it says they can never come to the truth, the true reality about life. Boy, we're seeing that today. They're changing reality into non-reality. Boys can have babies. Of course they can. You say otherwise, I'm going to flunk you. You say otherwise, you're fired. You're toxic. We can't have toxic people like you saying only women can have babies. It's nonsensical stuff. It's interesting. In a study done 2020, 4 years ago now, it's the latest study, the Cultural Research Center based in Arizona Christian University, they did this lengthy study, and it showed that evangelical Christians, only 43% now. These are people that go to church every Sunday, okay? They're evangelicals, not Catholics. Evangelical Protestant Christians in the United States, only 43% of them believe you get absolute truth from the Bible. Matter of fact, 46 do not even believe in absolute truth. And 48% believe they would rather trust their own opinion and feelings on whether something is moral or immoral. But the Bible is an outdated book. It cannot help them figure out morality. I'm not surprised by that. And boy, those numbers are decreasing year by year. Well, verse 8. Now, as Jannes and Jambres resisted Moses, so too these also resist the truth. Men of corrupt minds disapproved concerning the faith. For the first time in all the Bible, we seem to have landed on the names of the two magicians that Moses and Aaron faced when they stood before Pharaoh. Now, they did have oral traditions, and it is mentioned in some of the Jewish writings. Interesting, in the Jewish writings, they give the names of Jannes and Jambres, and they say that these guys followed Moses and the gang to continue to try to hurt them. And in the Jewish writings, it was actually Jannes and Jambres that gave Balaam the idea to please Balak to get the women to seduce the men. It was actually they're the ones in the Jewish traditions. But we happen to know these guys who stood against, and he's saying this is what it's going to look like. Now, I don't know how much Moses knew, but I think Aaron for sure, probably both of them thought when they take Aaron's snake and throw it down, or the rod, and becomes a snake, that was the end of the story. And when the magicians did the same thing, I think their mouths dropped. Like, I thought only God's power could do that. I didn't know there was another power in existence that could do that. They were head for head, matched. Now, the Bible does say that Aaron's rod ate up the magician's rod. One snake ate up the other. But I think that Pharaoh was saying, yeah, I'm not bowing my knee to you guys. My God's equal in power, and this is what we're going to come up against. These people are going to say, but look at the Mormons. They're worth $36 billion now, you know? They own Marriott. And how can they be wrong when they have such beautiful buildings and such wonderful choirs and they help out so many people? How could something of Satan be so wonderful and so helpful and so forth? And so will the Satan worship, so will the Antichrist religion. You're going to face off and you're not going to win right away. And then the next thing they did is started the plagues. And remember, the first plague was changing the water to blood. Now, you think if there was a real power here, they would have changed the blood back to water. Now, that would have been impressive. But they can't do positive things. They can only repeat the negative. And so water was scarce in Egypt, but whatever water was left, they turned it to blood. It's like, thank you. We have nothing to drink now. But again, impressive. And Moses and Aaron, shrunk a little bit, Man, I thought that was going to be the end of the story, but it's not. They could do it too. And then the second plague, remember, was frogs. And what did they do? They didn't take away the frogs. That would have been impressive. But they added more frogs. Oh, great. That's all we need. Well, we already have too many frogs to have many more frogs on top of too many frogs. Thank you. But again, it hardened Pharaoh's heart because he's going, hey, these guys are right there. Nothing new, no power that I haven't seen already. But then when they came to the third plague, the gnats, what did they say? We're done. We do not have this power. This is the finger of God. And then there was a fourth and a fifth and a sixth. These guys are watching the hand of God and the power of God, nothing that they could even come near. So the word here to us is to be encouraged. You are the modern day Moses. You, Timothy, and you today. We're not going to win them all, okay? We're going to lose some battles along the way. But it says that Moses in the past resisted. That's in the aorist past tense, which is a completed action. Aorist active indicative. It happened once and it was over. But then he says for us now to resist in the present tense. They're going to resist the truth in the present tense. But the outcome will be the same. History will repeat itself. Satan will be allowed to have more power, as we already know. They're going to have new doctrines of demons. They're going to have more power displayed. Matter of fact, in Revelation, surprisingly, people are intrigued by Satan's power, the Antichrist and the false prophet. In Revelation 13, verse 13 to 15, it says he performs great signs so that even makes the fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of the men, and that deceives those who dwell on the earth that by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image of the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. In 2 Thessalonians 2:9, the coming of the lawless one, 2 Thessalonians 2:9, the coming of the lawless one, or the Antichrist, is the one according to the working of Satan, with all what? Power, all signs, and all lying wonders. So it appears they're going head to head, and that it wasn't trickery by the magicians, but it was genuinely power, the power of Satan. And when Satan calls fire to heaven through these Antichrist and the prophet and so forth, people on the earth are going to go into the story. That's God. That's interesting because do you remember the story back with Elijah? And they made the sacrifice and the Baal worshipers couldn't get fire to come out of heaven. And they did it all day and all night. There were hundreds of them. They were shocked that fire didn't come out of heaven. And then Elijah comes up and fire comes out of heaven and consumes it. The miracle in that story was not that God brought fire to heaven. The miracle of the story is that these Baal worshipers, these Baal priests, didn't have success. They were sure that was something that might happen, that had the power. It wasn't even a question in their mind. But the miracle of the story is God held back the power of Satan in that story. Because we see in Revelation and Thessalonians, Satan has a lot of power to call fire to heaven. That's no big deal whatsoever. But again, we also are going to observe genuine demonic power. I've had people say, no, you got to look at the Ouija board. This thing really works. It's like, I know it works. You know, no, but I'm telling you, something really moved. That's like, it's called a demon. Yes, there are demons, and you're opening yourself up, and that's foolish. Of course it works. I don't question that it works. I know it works. Satan is live and well on planet Earth, and demons, if you are willing to open yourself up to them, they will come in, and they will trick you and do far more damage than you thought. In 2 Corinthians 11:15, therefore, talking about Satan who appears as an angel of light, he says, therefore it is no great thing. His ministers also transform, metamorphosize themselves into ministers of righteousness, whose end will be according to their work. So understand, people that are preaching demonic doctrines are not going to be ugly to us. They're going to be lovely to us. Their words are not going to be unpleasant. They're going to be very pleasant. Everybody is right with God. Everybody's a child of God. Nobody goes to hell. Your sins are not sins. You've just been told that. You can do that, have sex with whoever you want. There's no, that's an old teaching that went out thousands of years ago. Don't let the Judeo-Christian ethic oppress you. You're under oppression. Be liberated, be free, and say what you want, do what you want, live and let live, and whatever makes you happy, do it. But these men, they are corrupt minds, disprove concerning the faith. It may sound very similar to Christianity at some points, but it is not Christianity. Do not be fooled. Verse 9, but they will progress no further, for their folly will be manifest to all, as theirs also was. So just like Jennies and Jamborees eventually were stopped and brought to shame and embarrassed, and the true power of God was not limited and continued on, so we in the last days be encouraged. Interesting, James says, resist the devil and he will flee from you. In this case, that's what Moses did. He just kept at it until they had to flee, saying, oh, we can't do this. This is truly the hand of God. And so what is he saying? Greater is he who's in you than he who's in the world. We are going to have ultimate victory. For their folly will be manifested no farther. Interesting that the word folly in the Greek here is a madness expressing itself in rage. So it's telling us that Jennies and Jamborees, when they were like, this is the finger of God, it's like, wow, what do you think about that, guys? They were angry. They were angry they couldn't do what they did, and they had vengeance in their heart. They didn't become believers and say, Moses, I'll follow you. They were enraged, and they wanted Moses and the Egyptians to go down harder than ever. They're probably the ones who told Pharaoh, get the chariots and get the armies. Let's go chase them into the Red Sea. These guys were enraged. It's interesting. If you were described today, the progressive liberals in our country, I would describe them as madness expressing itself in rage. That's exactly what this word folly means. And it will become very, very clear that these guys have lost to the true doctrine, to the true power of God. Verse 10, but you have carefully followed my doctrine, manner of life, purpose, faith, long-suffering, love, and perseverance. But you are not like these guys. I understand it's similar. They might sing some of the same songs. They might quote some of the same scriptures. They might use some of the same analogies. It's when I've debated cults, it's interesting how they've used some of the same analogies I've heard pastors from the pulpit use. And but it's to support their heresy. And pastors in the church do it to support their truth. And it's interesting that, again, you are different. And what's going to cause you to stand out is not that you win every battle. It's not that you're stronger than everybody else and wiser than everybody else. And you're more pleasing. Understand, I've had debates where I must have looked grotesque and ugly to them because I'm telling them they have sin, but God loves them and died on the cross for their sin. And they're hearing death and cross and blood and sinfulness and hell or heaven. And this guy over here is saying there is no sin. There is no hell. You don't need any ugly cross or blood. You're fine the way you are, and you just need to get in touch with the God within you. Yeah, one message was much easier to hear, but what did Paul say? The offense, if I quit preaching the offense of the cross, he called the message of the cross offensive in Galatians 5. But I will not quit preaching the offense of the cross. Because it's the cross. If without the cross, we are not saved. But what makes you stand out? It's your character. It's not how you appear in front of the multitudes. There's a deep root system, a godly, powerful root system in you, Timothy, that's going so deep. You know, when you look at a giant redwood tree, you know what they say? That the roots have to be twice as deep. Have you ever been to Sequoia? Have you ever seen those trees? I mean, it just blows my mind. I mean, imagine if we had one of those trees planted right outside here. You would be able to see it from the Los Angeles airport. You'd be able to see it from Disneyland and probably from San Clemente. You would see this tree. But he's saying the reason you stand out because you have carefully followed. The word carefully here is you've investigated it. You've examined it. It's not a general idea you have on how you live. But you have looked at every angle and side of this, and you are doing what I have done. So when Paul led Timothy to Christ, as Paul's root systems were going deep and deep, Timothy's root systems right next were equally going as deep. And he points out a few things. First of all, the doctrine. You know, this is what Satan does. He gets as close as he can to Christianity, but makes sure there's enough lie in it to destroy, right? What do they say that if a plane leaving California going to Hawaii is just off a minute amount on the gauges of a plane, you would end up 3,000 miles out in the middle of the Pacific. They hit that little island, man, you got to be right because it's nothing but open sea around it. And so in the same way, if somebody had a giant plate of Thanksgiving food for you and they got a dropper out and dropped one drop of poison on it, and they said, okay, here it is. Eat 99.99% of it's perfect. Only one drop of it will kill you. Only one bite will kill you. Are you going to eat anything off that plate? Are you going to hand that plate to any one of your kids? Of course not. But this is what they do. Your doctrine is exactly my doctrine. It's the true doctrine without any deviation. But believing the right thing isn't enough, is it? There's a light year between knowing the right thing and doing the right thing. You got to know the right thing and then do the right thing. If you don't do the right thing, knowing the right thing doesn't really help anything, right? I mean, most guys dying of lung cancer in the hospital, it's like, didn't you know this causes cancer? Every day I smoked. I did know that, yes. But knowing that information didn't stop them from smoking. So again, it's got to be acted on. And that's why number 2, he says, the manner of life. How I lived. You followed how I lived. You examined it. Paul said to the Ephesian church in Acts 20:18, and when they had come to him, he said to them, the church of Ephesus, you know from the first day I came to Asia, in what manner I always lived among you. Paul had a great reputation, and it was lived out. And Timothy followed and lived it out the same way. And then he said the third thing is the purpose. Have you noticed that in other religions? Their purpose is clear and powerful. Go ask a Muslim what's the purpose of the Muslim religion. They'll tell you. It is to take over the world, and if we can't convert them, we kill them. But we do not stop until everybody is a Muslim and Shia law has dominated the world. They'll tell you that. That's as clear as day. Again, you talk to a Catholic, you talk to a Mormon. And so the purpose, the vision, the clear direction, what we are doing is one by one. That's all what we're doing. We just want to share the Lord with one person and disciple one person. You guys have heard those math, right? If I could get up and preach to 1 million people every day, and 100,000 people came to Christ, in 166 years, I would have preached to all the world and the world to be saved. Can't do it. I won't live to be 166, I hope. But if I spent 1 year leading one man to the Lord, discipling him for a year, the next year, the 2 of us lead one person to the Lord, disciple them for a year. The next year, the 4 of us. Do you know how long it takes to lead the whole world to Christ and disciple them for a year? 35 years. 1 generation with 5 years to spare. You see, it works mathematically. Our purpose is to go into the world and make disciples, to share the gospel. If they receive the gospel, then to say, let's start reading the Bible together. Let's come to church with me. Go to Bible study with me. Listen to this message with me. Let's grow and know the whole Scripture. And that can be done if you're in an underground church. It can be done in anywhere at all. And then the faith and trust in God went deep. And then the long-suffering. This word long-suffering is about not getting vengeful for those who are treating you wrong. Isn't that great? Paul didn't do that, did he? Just like Jesus, in being reviled, he didn't revile in return. In being cursed at, he didn't curse back. He had a long-suffering love, even for those who treated him badly. And we see that agape love, a love that believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things, a love that never fails, no matter what they do. Just like Jesus. Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. And then the 7th thing is perseverance and endurance. Literally, it's taking a greater load and another load. No matter how big the load, you can endure it. So no matter how, if they beat me, if they shipwrecked me, if they stoned me to death, if they put me in prison, no matter what they did. And then the 8th thing we find in verse 11, persecutions, and the 9th thing, afflictions, the sufferings. And again, and today we do know there are serious physical sufferings happening in China and places like India and Iran, all the Eastern type of countries. But we also have to endure our persecution, suffer the financial downside or get a lesser grade in college because you're not going to bow down as a Christian. And then in verse 11, he says, these persecutions, afflictions, which happened to me in Antioch, Iconium, Lystra, have persecutions I endured. Out of them all, the Lord delivered me. Timothy would know this well, because Paul's describing his first missionary journey where Timothy was saved. Timothy was from Lystra. If you look at the map of Turkey, it's almost right in the middle, is the ancient site of Lystra, out in the middle of nowhere. And then all of Turkey became the Christian hub of the world. I just want you to think about this a minute. Turkey was the Christian hub of the world. And you know what? When you go to Turkey today, it's almost zero Christians. And to be a Christian, you could probably get killed. Then you go to Germany. It was the Christian hub of the world. And today, if you find some Christianity there, you probably wouldn't stand it. Even you wouldn't make it through one church service. There's very little Protestant Christianity there. And then England. This last year, they are now a Muslim nation. There are more Muslims than Christians, and they are now listed not as a Christian nation, but a Muslim nation. We're the Christian hub of the world. And now we look at America. Look at America and imagine in 100 years, there's no Christianity there whatsoever. And to be a Christian might get you thrown in prison. This is the world we're living in. And Paul is saying here, you know what it was like when I was there. They beat Paul. They actually, in the city where Timothy was born and raised, they stoned Paul to death and then dragged his body outside. The Lord raised him from the dead. He went in and preached some more. It was under that persecution that Timothy said, yes, I'll follow Jesus. He prayed the sinner's prayer, probably with a Paul who had a black eye and his head was shaped weird from all the knots from the rocks, and his lip was big and his arm was killing him. And he's like, okay, Timothy, you want to ask Jesus into your life? This is what he's trying to say to him. It's under that difficulty that you saw the power of the gospel. Don't shy away now. Don't be afraid now. All those persecutions I endured, out of them all, the Lord delivered me. Remember, Peter said, don't think it's strange when we go through trials. And then he also said, I love this in 1 Peter 4:16, if you're being persecuted for being a Christian, don't be ashamed. You know, they tried to shame Jesus. They put two criminals deserving of death on each side of him so he would be guilty by association. Oh, I know that guy, he's a definite criminal. I know the guy who's a definite criminal. I don't know the guy in the middle, but I'm sure he's just as bad as they are. That was the implication. So the same with you. They put you in the same jail with murderers and rapists to make you feel as dirty, like you are a criminal. I love David's. In Psalm 34:19, he said, many are the afflictions of the righteous. You guys want to finish it? But the Lord delivers him out of them all. Of course, as Paul is saying this, he knows he's getting ready to die. This is his last letter. He's moments away from being beheaded. His deliverance was not deliverance on earth. What's it say in Hebrews 11? By faith, they were saved from the sword. And by faith, what? They were killed with the sword. By faith, they were delivered by God raising them from the dead. But by faith, they were sawn in two, burnt with fire. I love it, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Remember Nebuchadnezzar? He heated up the fire. He goes, can your God save you from that fire? And they said, can he? Yes. Will he? We don't know. But either way, you're going to change your tune. We're not going to listen to you anymore. If we die, we don't have to listen to you. And if we live through that fire, we're going to listen to a different Nebuchadnezzar. And how right they were. We win either way. And then finally, last verse here, verse 12. We know this promise of God, one of the promised scriptures. Yes, all who desire to live godly in Christ Jesus will what? Suffer persecution. Not if you live lukewarm. Not if you hide the candlestick under the bed or under the bushel. If you want to be an undercover Christian and say, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, that's all I want to talk about, then you won't suffer persecution. It's only for those who are clearly making a difference for Christ. Amen?